The congressional hearing room fell into an electric silence. Cameras hummed softly, red lights blinking as every network in the nation went live. The seal of the United States Congress loomed above the raised dais, flanked by the stars and stripes, symbols of justice, or, as some whispered, the stage for political theater. At the center of it all sat Mark Levin, the conservative radio titan. Decades of broadcasting had trained him to command silence without uttering a word. His sharp eyes glimmered behind the rims of his glasses, scanning the faces before him, the lawmakers, the press, and one woman he could not underestimate. Representative Jasmine Crockett, Democrat from Texas, sat across the table. Her posture was calm, but her gaze burned with focus. Her reputation preceded her. Fiery, unflinching, and unafraid to challenge power, no matter how loud or well-funded it was. Levin leaned toward his microphone, his tone measured but dangerous. "Congresswoman," he began, voice deep and deliberate, "for months, your committee has accused patriots like me of spreading what you call misinformation. I wonder, when did disagreement become a crime in this country?" A murmur rolled through the chamber. Crockett didn't flinch. She folded her hands, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Levin," she replied, her voice calm but cutting, "disagreement isn't a crime. But endangering democracy by fueling lies, that's not patriotism. That's propaganda." The tension in the air thickened. Reporters leaned forward, fingers poised above their keyboards. Every syllable was ammunition for headlines that would ignite by morning. Levin smirked. "Democracy, Congresswoman, thrives on free speech. But apparently, free speech only matters when it favors your side." Crockett leaned slightly forward, her tone steady. "Free speech isn't freedom from accountability, Mr. Levin. Words have power. And when those words lead to threats, riots, or worse, we have a duty to question them." A flicker of irritation crossed Levin's face, the kind that only appeared when someone challenged his control. He had spent a lifetime bending narratives. Rarely did anyone bend his. From the dais, Chairman Robert Fields cleared his throat. "Let's keep this civil," he warned, though his eyes betrayed amusement. The spectacle was good for ratings. And for votes. Levin straightened his notes, his baritone voice now turning toward the audience watching at home. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing here isn't oversight, it's overreach. This is what happens when political elites use their power to silence dissent." Crockett's eyes narrowed. "No one's silencing you, Mr. Levin. You've had the largest microphone in America for 30 years. We're just asking, who benefits when your words tear the nation apart?" A ripple of applause rose from the public gallery before the chairman's gavel slammed down. "Order!" Levin's lips curved into a thin smile. "Who benefits?" "The truth, Congresswoman. The truth always benefits." Crockett met his gaze. "That depends," she said, "on who's defining it." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Or a warning. The cameras zoomed in. Hashtags were already trending. In living rooms across America, families argued, alliances formed, and old resentments rekindled. Behind the curtain of the hearing room, aides whispered into earpieces. Someone from Levin's team sent out a pre-written statement to media outlets, framing him as the victim of government censorship. Someone from Crockett's side drafted a fiery tweet, "Accountability isn't tyranny." The battle lines were no longer partisan. They were philosophical, truth versus perception, democracy versus control. As the questioning continued, Crockett shifted gears, pulling up a series of audio clips on the record. Statements Levin had made on air in the weeks before the Capitol unrest. "Mr. Levin," she said, "do you deny calling for your listeners to take back their government by any means necessary?" Levin's voice hardened. "I said no such thing. My words were about peaceful resistance, the kind this country was founded on." She clicked play. The recording filled the room. His own voice echoed, passionate and undeniable. "If your leaders won't fight for you, then you fight for yourselves." The founders would expect nothing less. A hush swept the chamber. Levin's jaw tightened. His legal counsel whispered something in his ear. The chairman looked uneasy now, sensing the tide shifting. "Context matters," Levin snapped. "You're twisting my words." Crockett's reply came like a blade. "So does consequence." He stared at her, the faintest tremor flickering in his composure. For the first time, Mark Levin, the man who commanded millions, looked like he was losing control of the narrative. As the session recessed, Levin rose slowly from his seat. He turned to face Crockett, his expression unreadable. "This isn't over," he said quietly. She met his gaze, unwavering. "It never is." The cameras flashed again, capturing the moment that would define the next news cycle. Two forces colliding in the temple of American democracy, neither willing to blink. Night fell over Washington, but the city did not sleep. The storm that had started inside the congressional hearing now roared through every network, every phone screen, every political war room. Mark Levin's voice, captured in that single damning clip, was playing on repeat, dissected by pundits, spliced into campaign ads, turned into sound bites that could make or break careers. Inside a sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the Capitol dome, Jasmine Crockett stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear. The faint reflection of flashing lights danced across her face. "Yes," she said softly. "We've verified the source. It came from inside his production team." A pause. "No. Don't release their name yet. Not until we know who else was involved." She hung up and exhaled, the weight of what was coming pressing against her ribs. In D.C., leaks were weapons, and someone had just handed her a loaded one. Down the street, inside a luxury hotel suite, Mark Levin was pacing. His phone buzzed every few seconds, missed calls from network executives, furious sponsors, and one message that made him stop cold. "They know about the second recording." Levin's hand tightened around the phone. He looked over at his attorney, Daniel Rusk, who sat behind a mountain of open laptops. "Who leaked it?" Levin demanded. Rusk didn't look up. "We don't know. But if the committee gets that second tape, they'll crucify you." Levin's voice dropped to a growl. "Then make sure they don't." The next morning, the hearing resumed under heightened security and heavier cameras. Protesters gathered outside, their chants echoing through the marble corridors. Some carried signs reading "Free Speech Under Fire," while others shouted "Truth Matters." The line between justice and spectacle blurred until it was invisible. As the gavel struck, Chairman Fields announced gravely, "Before we proceed, this committee has received a new piece of evidence relevant to Mr. Levin's testimony." A ripple went through the room. Crockett looked up. She hadn't authorized this. Someone had jumped the gun. An aide rushed to her side, whispering frantically, "It's the second file. It leaked." The screens flickered to life. A new recording began, Levin's unmistakable voice again, but this time, colder. "Calculated. They don't get it, Dan. We don't need them to believe, just to doubt. Doubt is enough to win." Gasps erupted. Journalists scrambled for their phones. Levin's team froze, their faces drained of color. Levin stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That recording is taken out of context," he shouted. "That was a private conversation, illegally obtained." Crockett rose to her feet, the fury in her voice sharp and clear. "Then explain the context, Mr. Levin. You told your producer that doubt is more powerful than truth. That isn't journalism. That's manipulation." "Manipulation?" he shot back. "You're manipulating this entire process. You and your friends in the media want a villain, and I'm convenient." "Then prove us wrong," she said quietly. The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. Outside, the world spun faster. The leaked recording triggered congressional subpoenas, security lockdowns, and a special counsel investigation into how it was obtained. Social media erupted. Half of America called it justice, the other half called it tyranny. But inside Crockett's team, unease grew. The leak had come too early, too precise. Someone was playing a deeper game. Late that night, in her office, Crockett replayed the clip again, over and over. In one small section, buried beneath Levin's words, she heard something strange. A faint voice in the background, distorted but familiar. She called her aide back. Enhance that section. Filter out the static. The computer processed the sound. And then, clear as day, a woman's voice emerged. He doesn't know we're recording yet. Crockett's eyes widened. Whoever had leaked this wasn't a whistleblower. They were an insider, someone working with Levin, maybe even within the investigation itself. A trap was being set, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The next morning, the front page of the Washington Herald screamed, "Crockett team leaks illegal recording. Congressional probe under fire." She slammed the paper onto her desk. "This is impossible," she muttered. "We didn't leak it." Her chief of staff looked grim. "Someone wants to flip the narrative. And it's working. You're the headline now." Meanwhile, on his morning broadcast, Mark Levin returned to the airwaves, defiant, wounded, and dangerous. "My friends," he began, "they tried to silence me, and now they've broken the law to do it. But you know me, I won't stop speaking the truth." His listeners cheered. Donations poured in. His poll numbers surged. In one night, the villain had turned victim. Back in the Capitol, Crockett stared at the glowing TV screen in disbelief. "Every time we get closer," she whispered, "he slips through." Her aide hesitated. "What do we do now?" She turned away from the screen, her jaw set. "We find out who leaked that recording, and why. Because this isn't about politics anymore. This is about control." The camera zoomed slowly out, Washington glowing like a chessboard at midnight, the players moving unseen, every word, every secret, another piece in a war for truth itself. The Capitol hallways buzzed with unease. The once routine sound of footsteps and whispered conversations had been replaced by the low hum of paranoia. After the second leak, every aide, every assistant, every passing glance carried suspicion. Inside her office, Representative Jasmine Crockett stood surrounded by folders, encrypted tablets, and glowing monitors. Her once confident team now sat in tense silence. The storm outside wasn't just political. It was personal. She looked to her chief of staff, Maya Torres, her most trusted ally since her first campaign. "Who had access to the file before it leaked?" Crockett asked. Maya's voice was steady but strained. "Just 4 of us. Me, legal counsel, the tech aide who handled the security clearance, and your communications director." Crockett's brow furrowed. "Harris?" Maya nodded. "He was seen leaving the building after midnight. Claimed he was finalizing press statements." Crockett turned toward the window, the city lights reflected in her eyes. "Find him. Quietly." Meanwhile, across the city, Mark Levin was sitting in a dimly lit private club, a cigar burning slowly between his fingers. The smell of oak and smoke filled the air. Across from him sat a woman in a dark trench coat, poised, confident, unflinching. "You did well," Levin said, his tone half admiring, half wary. The woman smiled faintly. "The Congresswoman's office is in chaos. They don't know who to trust." Levin's eyes narrowed. "And the tape?" "Planted perfectly," she replied. "They'll spend weeks chasing ghosts while the public turns on her." He leaned back, smirking. "Chaos is the best cover. While they fight each other, we rewrite the story." She gathered her things, but before she left, she said something that made even Levin pause. "Be careful, Mark. You're not the only one with leverage. The person who made that recording, they kept a copy. Insurance." Levin's smirk faltered. "Who has it?" The woman's expression darkened. Someone you shouldn't have underestimated. Then she was gone. Back in the committee offices, Crockett's patience was unraveling. Harris had vanished. His phone, disconnected. His security card, last used at 12:43 a.m., in a restricted data room. Maya burst into the office, laptop in hand. We've traced an encrypted file transfer from our server to an unknown network in Virginia, hours before the leak went public. Government or private? Crockett asked sharply. Private, but masked through 3 proxies. Whoever did this knew our system inside out. Crockett's jaw tightened. Then it's not just a mole. It's a professional. The realization hit her like a cold wave. The attack wasn't just meant to expose Levon, it was meant to discredit her. To make her the story, the scandal, the distraction. And it was working. The next morning, the committee hearing resumed. Reporters shouted questions as Crockett entered the chamber. Accusations swirling about illegal leaks, partisan witch hunts, and deep state corruption. Levon sat at the witness table again, the picture of calm defiance. He had come armed with something new, a file folder he placed deliberately before him. Before this committee continues its so-called investigation, Levon began, I'd like to submit evidence of misconduct by the Congresswoman herself. Gasps erupted. Crockett's spine straightened. What is this stunt, Mr. Levon? He smiled coolly. Not a stunt. A recording. Your staff, discussing how to control the leak narrative. He gestured to the clerk. Play it. A clip played through the speakers, muffled but clear enough. Maya's voice, unmistakable. We'll spin it as a patriotic leak, say it came from an anonymous insider. If the press buys it, Crockett stays clean. The room erupted. Chairman shouted for order. Cameras flashed. Crockett's heart pounded. She knew that line. But it was from a private meeting weeks ago. Edited, twisted, weaponized. This is doctored, she protested. That's not the full recording. Levon leaned forward, his smile slow and venomous. Then by all means, release the full one. Her silence filled the room like a confession. She couldn't. Because the full recording contained classified details, unrelated to the hearing but dangerous if made public. He knew it. And she knew he knew. Later that night, Crockett sat alone in her office, the city now silent outside. She stared at the screen, replaying the edited clip over and over. Her name was trending again. #Crockett cover-up. Maya entered quietly, guilt in her eyes. I never meant for this. I know, Crockett said softly. You were doing damage control. But someone got our files. Someone on the inside. She looked up, determination replacing despair. If Levon wants to play war, then we play smarter. Maya frowned. Meaning we don't fight him in public, Crockett said. We expose him from within. Across the river, in a high-rise penthouse, Levon's phone buzzed again. A single text appeared from an unknown number. You think you control the leaks. You don't. Next one drops at midnight. He froze, his reflection caught in the dark glass. For the first time, the king of the airwaves looked like a man who'd lost control of his own echo. As the clock struck 12, a new audio file appeared online. This time, not from Crockett's side. It was Levon's voice, recorded in secret, unmistakable. If the system burns, maybe that's the only way to rebuild it. Within minutes, the world exploded again. And this time, neither of them knew who had pulled the trigger. The Capitol was drowning in noise. Outside, crowds chanted under flashing lights. Reporters swarmed the marble steps like vultures circling a battlefield. Inside, lawmakers whispered in corners, trading fear for strategy. The third leak had detonated like a bomb, not just politically, but morally. For the first time, no one knew who was controlling the truth. In her office, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat with bloodshot eyes, watching the chaos unfold on screen. Every network was airing the same headline. New recording implicates both Levon and Crockett in media collusion scandal. Her chief of staff, Maya Torres, looked pale. They're saying the entire hearing was orchestrated. That you and Levon were staging conflict for attention. Crockett's head snapped up. That's insane. He's my political opposite. Maya hesitated. Doesn't matter. The footage was edited. It shows you both in the same room, talking strategy, even though we know that meeting never happened. Crockett's breath caught. Deep fake. Maya nodded grimly. Professional grade. If we don't disprove it fast, the narrative sticks. Crockett rose to her feet, pacing. Then we find whoever's manufacturing this, because if they can fake that, they can destroy anyone. Across town, Mark Levon sat in his home studio, silent for once. His producer was pacing nervously. You've got to say something, Mark, the producer urged. People are turning on you. They think you staged the whole thing. Levon's face was pale under the studio lights. I didn't. You know I didn't. The producer swallowed. That doesn't matter anymore. Truth doesn't trend. Anger does. Levon's jaw tightened. Then we give them anger. He hit the record button, leaned toward the mic, and his voice dropped into that familiar booming tone. My friends, they've taken our truth and twisted it into a lie. Now they claim I stood beside the very people I was exposing. But I promise you, I will not be silenced. Not by lies. Not by power. Within minutes, his statement went viral. Donations poured in. But something was different. The comments weren't just supportive. They were militant. Threads calling for revolution, posts naming officials, maps of Washington shared in encrypted groups. Levon didn't realize it yet, but his words had crossed a line he couldn't walk back. Back in the Capitol, Crockett faced the committee again, this time not as an investigator, but as the accused. Cameras flashed. The air was poisonous with tension. Chairman Fields leaned forward. Representative Crockett, are you denying the authenticity of the footage presented against you? Yes, she said firmly. That video is fabricated. I have never met Mr. Levon outside of this chamber. Someone is manufacturing evidence to discredit this committee. A murmur swept through the audience. One congressman whispered, "Convenient excuse." Crockett clenched her jaw. With respect, sir, this isn't about convenience. It's about a coordinated attack, not just on me, but on truth itself. From the witness table, Levon watched in silence. Their eyes met, not as enemies, but as two people caught in the same trap. She realized it first. Whoever was orchestrating this chaos wanted them both destroyed. Later that night, a message appeared on Crockett's encrypted device. No sender. No traceable IP. Just a file, and one line of text. You want the truth? Meet me alone. Attached was a video clip, raw, unedited, time-stamped weeks before the leaks. It showed a dark conference room, a shadowy figure speaking to someone off-camera. Upload it from both sides, the voice said. Make it look like a war. When they fight each other, the system collapses quietly. Crockett's pulse quickened. She recognized the voice, faint but unmistakable. Chairman Robert Fields. Her stomach turned cold. The very man who presided over the hearings had been manipulating both camps, feeding each with poison. She looked at Maya. He's behind all of it. The leaks, the edits, everything. He's manufacturing division to seize control of the committee. Maya whispered, if you expose him, you'll bring the whole institution down. Crockett's eyes hardened. Maybe it's time someone did. Meanwhile, Levon sat alone in his studio, watching a grainy feed from an unknown source. The same clip. The same voice. Fields. He laughed bitterly. So that's the game. He picked up his phone and dialed a private number. Congresswoman Crockett, he said when she answered. We need to talk. A pause. You expect me to trust you? She asked. I expect you to hate him more than you hate me, Levon replied. We were both played. There was silence, then a quiet, steady breath. Where? She asked. Neutral ground, he said. No cameras, no aides. Tomorrow at 10. The next morning, under a gray Washington sky, two political enemies met in a shuttered courthouse, the same place where their televised battle had begun. Crockett stood by the bench, arms crossed. Levon approached, briefcase in hand. He opened it. Inside were transcripts, emails, payment records, all leading back to Chairman Fields. He funded the leaks, Levon said, through shell donors and fake think tanks. He's been using both our names to push legislation that expands surveillance powers, under the guise of protecting democracy. Crockett scanned the documents, disbelief turning to fury. He played us like chess pieces, she whispered. Turned truth into a weapon. Levon nodded grimly. So, Congresswoman, what happens when the left hand and the right hand realize the same person's pulling the strings? She met his eyes. Then we cut the strings. The tension broke, not as friendship, but as alliance born of necessity. Outside, sirens wailed. Inside, the first fragile truce in Washington's war for truth had just been formed. The Capitol was silent again, but this silence wasn't from peace. It was the calm before the storm. 1,000 lenses pointed toward the hearing room as the public gathered for what was being called the final inquiry. Every outlet had the same headline, Crockett and Levon, together. 4 days, speculation ran wild. Were they allies? Traitors? Heroes? No one knew. But one thing was certain, this hearing would end someone's career, maybe more than one. At precisely 10 a.m., Representative Jasmine Crockett entered the chamber, a steel calm in her posture. Behind her, Mark Levon, dressed in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. They took their seats side by side, two figures who had once been fire and gasoline. Chairman Robert Fields presided again, his smile thin, eyes scanning them like prey that didn't know it was cornered. Let's proceed, he said smoothly. Representative Crockett, Mr. Levon, I understand you've requested to make a joint statement. The committee will allow it, though I must admit, this arrangement is unusual. Crockett leaned into her microphone. Truth often is. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. She continued, for weeks, this committee has been manipulated, by lies, by media spin, and by false evidence. But today, we bring proof of who orchestrated that manipulation. Fields frowned slightly, feigning confusion. Proof? Of what exactly? Levon slid a thick folder across the table. Of you. The room froze. Cameras zoomed in. Every journalist in the room leaned forward. Crockett's voice cut through the silence. This folder contains payment records linking shell companies to your personal accounts, Mr. Chairman. Those same companies funded the doctored footage used to defame this committee, and both of us. Fields gave a thin laugh. That's absurd. Levon's eyes narrowed. Is it? Because the source files were traced to your private server, the same IP address that uploaded the so-called deep fake to a political operative in Virginia. He pressed a button on a remote. The monitors flickered, and the video from segment 4 appeared. The real one. The grainy conference room. Fields' voice, clear and damning. Upload it from both sides. Make it look like a war. When they fight each other, the system collapses quietly. Gasps erupted through the hall. Reporters scrambled to capture every frame. Fields' face went pale, then hardened. You think this forgery will save you? The chain of custody on that file is meaningless in a digital age. Crockett rose from her seat. Actually, we anticipated that. which is why we've already submitted authenticated copies to the Inspector General, the FBI, and the press. Levon added, they go public in 60 seconds. He glanced at his watch. 59:58. Field's composure cracked. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You'll bring down half of Congress with this. Crockett met his gaze, unflinching. Then maybe it's time we rebuild something honest. Outside, sirens wailed as agents entered the building. The world watched live as Chairman Fields was escorted from the chamber, his face gray, his legacy collapsing under the weight of his own deceit. Levon and Crockett remained seated. Neither spoke. Neither smiled. The cameras turned to them, hungry for soundbites, for victory speeches. But Crockett only said, softly, "This isn't victory. It's a warning." Levon nodded slightly. Truth shouldn't have to fight this hard to survive. Hours later, after the hearing adjourned, the two met again in the hallway. No cameras this time. The building was eerily quiet. You realize they'll come for both of us next, Levon said. Crockett gave a tired smile. They already have. But at least now they'll know who we are. He extended his hand. Strange world, where truth makes allies out of enemies. She shook it. Or survivors. By evening, the city was alight again. Screens across America replayed the footage on loop. Field's downfall, Crockett's words, Levin's confrontation. For once, the nation wasn't divided between red and blue, but between those who feared the truth and those who demanded it. An anchor's voice echoed through the broadcasts. Tonight, Washington faces an unprecedented reckoning. Two figures from opposite sides have exposed a web of corruption that reaches the highest levels of power. In the quiet of her office, Jasmine Crockett stood by the window, watching the Capitol glow against the night sky. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You did well. But the game's not over." She frowned. "Levon," she whispered to herself. But the message vanished before she could reply. Across the city, in a dimly lit studio, Mark Levon stared at his microphone. 4 years it had been his weapon, his pulpit. But tonight, he hesitated. He finally hit record. "My listeners," he began quietly, "tonight I learned that truth doesn't belong to one side. It belongs to those willing to risk everything for it. Maybe, just maybe, that's what patriotism really is." He paused. Somewhere deep down he knew, the war for truth was only beginning.